You probably walk through life thinking you're a completely rational adult, right? I mean, we all do. You weigh your options, make free choices, decide who to trust, how to act, the whole shebang. But what if you're not entirely in the driver's seat? Today, we're going to challenge that assumption right out of the gate. Because honestly, the reality of human behavior is far more complex and, frankly, way more fascinating than we usually admit. Let's get into it.
So, are you really making choices? Well, a massive body of research tells us something that can actually be kind of shocking to hear. It suggests that the major decisions you make today, like who you instinctively trust, what deeply scares you, and exactly how you handle conflict at work or at home, were actually largely shaped before you even blew out the candles on your 10th birthday. Crazy, right? Your early environment essentially wrote the operating system that your adult mind is still running on today.
Okay, let's dive into this with some real-world examples. Do you constantly over-apologize, like literally saying sorry to a chair you just bumped into? Research traces that directly back to having a highly critical parent. What about avoiding conflict at all costs? That often stems from growing up in a volatile household where keeping the peace was your absolute best survival tactic. Or maybe you have a terrible time accepting praise. That one is deeply rooted in childhood emotional neglect. You see, these aren't just quirky personality traits. They are childhood survival mechanisms loudly echoing into your adult life.
Section 1. Building your brain blueprint.
90%. A staggering 90% of your brain development happens before you reach the age of 5. Just think about the gravity of that for a second. Before you're even sitting in a kindergarten classroom, your brain is intensely forging the essential neural pathways that will dictate how you perceive the world, how you process your emotions, and really how you behave for the rest of your life. You are quite literally building the hardware that your adult mind will rely on.
And what's really interesting about this is how this raw brain hardware translates directly into our human relationships. This is all mapped out by attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. They discovered that the early bond you have with your primary caregiver creates a rigid mental model for all your future relationships. You basically fall into one of 4 styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. If your caregiver was consistent and responsive, you likely developed a secure attachment. Awesome. But if they were inconsistent or emotionally absent, you adapted by becoming anxious or avoidant. And those early mental models act as the invisible blueprint for your romantic and platonic relationships today.
Let's look at Dr. Edward Tronick's famous still face experiment. It's a tense 2-minute micro-story that perfectly captures our deep biological need for connection. At 0 seconds, a mother plays naturally with her baby. They co-regulate, they're beautifully attuned, it's great. But at the 1-minute mark, she's instructed to turn away and then look back with a completely blank, unresponsive still face. Within literally seconds, the baby attempts to get her attention. When she doesn't respond, the baby exhibits profound, heartbreaking distress. By the 2-minute mark, the infant is crying and completely dysregulated. It visually proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we are biologically hardwired to need emotional attunement and co-regulation right from the start.
Section 2. When childhood hurts.
In psychological research, there's a term called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. This covers abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction experienced early in a person's life. And the sobering reality here is that early unmet needs and traumatic experiences don't just magically vanish when you turn 18. They don't stay neatly packed away in the past. Instead, they actively resurface in your adult behavior. Your inner child doesn't disappear. It manifests those unmet needs through things like an intense fear of abandonment, chronic people-pleasing, or a profound difficulty in forming trust.
To really ground the severity of this research, consider this number: 17,000. Back in 1998, Dr. Vincent Felitti conducted the landmark ACE study, surveying 17,000 adult patients at Kaiser Permanente. I mean, this wasn't some small, isolated academic exercise. It was a massive, sweeping look at the general adult population to see just how deeply early trauma impacts our lifelong biology.
So, the crucial point here is the stark, undeniable link they found between those early childhood experiences and severe adult health outcomes. For folks who reported an ACE score of 4 or higher, the biological toll is just staggering. They were found to be 12 times more likely to attempt suicide compared to those with lower scores, and twice as likely to develop heart disease. The data shows us, plain and simple, that childhood trauma isn't just psychological. It writes itself into our very biology, heavily contributing to severe adult health issues like heart disease, clinical depression, and addiction.
Now, you might be wondering, how is that even biologically possible? Well, it largely comes down to epigenetics. Think of your DNA as sheet music and epigenetics as the musician. The notes don't change, but how the music is played absolutely changes depending on your environment. Your behaviors and environment,
like going through traumatic experiences, can literally alter how your genes work. This means trauma might actually be carried and transmitted across generations biologically. The immense stress your grandparents went through could theoretically alter gene expression in a way that affects your nervous system's baseline today. Mind-blowing, right?
Section 3. Tracing your adult behaviors.
This brings us to a fascinating, really pivotal psychological concept: schemas. Schemas are deeply held foundational beliefs formed back in childhood. Think of them like invisible, unconscious filters layered over your eyes through which you view every single adult experience. Say a childhood experience taught you the schema that the world is dangerous. Well, as an adult, you will unknowingly filter a harmless, perfectly normal email from your boss as a direct threat. You filter your interactions to confirm those exact early beliefs, even when the reality right in front of you suggests otherwise.
And because we learn to regulate our emotions through co-regulation with our caregivers, just like we saw in that still face experiment, if we didn't get that attunement, we inevitably struggle with emotional control under stress as adults. These intergenerational patterns are unconsciously inherited. Your specific parenting style, your default communication habits, your knee-jerk emotional responses when you get into a heated argument, you likely inherited them from your parents, who unknowingly inherited them from theirs. It's like an invisible psychological baton passed down through time.
Section 4. Rewiring your mind.
But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. Our immense hope lies in neuroplasticity. That's the brain's incredible, lifelong ability to rewire itself, form new neural connections, and successfully interrupt those inherited patterns. Just because your brain mapped out a defensive response to conflict when you were 4 years old does not mean you are permanently stuck with it at 40. No way. Because of neuroplasticity, through targeted effort, therapy, and deep awareness, your brain is absolutely capable of laying down new, much healthier tracks.
Practically speaking, this looks like a 3-step framework. First up, building awareness. This is simply noticing those moments when your inner child is reacting to a trigger rather than your logical adult self. Next is schema therapy, which is explicitly designed for this exact purpose, to identify and actively heal those childhood origin schemas that drive adult dysfunction. And finally, intentional practice. This is literally like going to the gym for your nervous system. It takes daily, deliberate effort to choose a new behavior over the deeply worn, comfortable groove of an old childhood habit.
A massive part of this healing journey involves what mental health professionals call reparenting. This is the therapeutic concept of providing, either through profound self-compassion or a safe therapeutic relationship, the exact emotional experiences that were missing in your childhood. It's about finally nurturing your own inner child, actively giving yourself the validation, safety, and attunement you always needed, and working to permanently resolve those deeply rooted, unmet needs.
So, understanding exactly where your patterns come from is the crucial first step, but will you take the second? You have the blueprint of your mind laid out in front of you now, and the power to actively rewire it is entirely in your hands. If you found this explainer fascinating and want to keep decoding the human mind with us in plain, powerful language, make sure to hit subscribe. We explore transformative concepts like this every single week. Thank you so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.